Hello everybody, today we're taking a look at these GEPRC 1206 4500 kV motors. Get your pause finger ready because we're going to run through this real quick. The motors weigh 8.42 grams. They have about 90 millimeters of motor wire length. With GEMFAN 2540 props, that weighs 91.92 grams, and oddly enough, with the GEMFAN 3035 props, it weighs 90.42 grams on my test rig. Each motor also comes with 3 different sets of screws, which is nice as well. And these motors are very smooth. This flight is on the GEMFAN 2540 props, and it flies real well. If you're curious about if this motor, because it is a bigger size, will fit the Avon props, they do. I chose not to fly with them in this case. I actually did fly a little bit with them when I was testing out 3-inch props, but the GEMFAN 3035 props are just so much better. I thought those props were easier to tune, so in the second flight, I will be using the GEMFAN 3035 props. Of course, there is a little bit of slop in the flight, and you'll have to forgive me for that. I am not a perfect pilot, but this is real-world testing. One thing I noticed, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper when I do the 3-inch prop testing, is that the leader I actually got a 3-minute flight on, so I was very curious when comparing this with a lighter rig and the different size stator on a motor running 4S as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into it. I think with these motors being so smooth, it means that the tuning is relatively easy. They are 1206s, so they have good torque. I would say if I had to compare them, they compare a lot the iFlight 1108 motors. Of course, that varies depending upon the KV. You might remember the iFlight XF3. It's actually branded in a DC, but that machine that I reviewed just a couple of videos ago, that was also flying, that was 5,000 kV, and it was flying 3-inch props. So I did have an opportunity to fly those on smaller props when I didn't, after I got done with that video. Now you can see we got our first low battery warning here just a moment ago, and flat flight, and we're gonna get to about, I think it's about 2 minutes and 10 seconds in this flight, and then you have about a 7 to 10 second landing that's coming up here in a minute. So not extraordinarily long flight time. I was a little bit disappointed in the efficiency with 2.5-inch props, but it does fly well and it can handle them. So if you choose to use those, you can use this as a gauge for the flight experience you might have on a machine that weighs very, very similar. Of course, we are flying with the China Hobbyline 4S 450 milliamp, the same test batteries we were using in the last test. This flight is with the GEMFAN 3035 prop. You can see a little bit of them down in the lower right and the lower left. I do have the throttle value in the top left-hand part of the OSD as well. This is a little bit of a different turn for me going over the swing set, but it was kind of fun to do. Decided to work that in some. But I thought this motor really best fits these 3-inch props. I think that's probably their sweet spot. I found that you do get a little bit of longer flight time, and I actually felt like I could fly better with the 3-inch props than I could with the 2540 props. So something to be aware of there. I don't think that the props bog it down on the low end, and it has pretty good top end as well. I was a little bit more hopeful that the top end would be a little bit more mind-blowing, that when you hit the throttle hard you would just get exponentially higher, but really didn't. We got pretty high, but I would say it's on par with some of those higher 1100 series motors, even on 3S. But this, again, it was running 4S, so you have a difference there. You know, if you're running the 1108 motors or some even 1107 motors, you may find that your punch outs are just as high. But in general, with 1107 and 1108 motors, I'm only getting a 2-minute flight on those. Sometimes I have to even back off sooner. What I'm looking for is to not get a battery warning before, say, a minute 40, and that's not including punch outs, just when I'm flying hard around the yard there. That's kind of what I'm shooting for, and that I think will get me to a 2-minute and 30-second flight. I did have a couple of flights that got closer on the 3-inch props to 3 minutes. I think I got to 2:51. That was the longest flight I had when I wasn't just, cruising around or putzing around, whatever you have you. But when I was actually flying and trying to fly more aggressively, the longest flight I had was 2:51. And I did talk about that leader flight here not that long ago, and that 3-minute flight. I noticed in that flight that my passes through the yard were much longer. So that was more of a cruising 3-minute flight than it was some of these hard turns and short turnarounds that we see in this flight. So there's a little bit of your flight difference there between what you may have seen when I did that 3-minute leader flight versus this flight. The leader flight was a little bit more tepid, a little less camera angle, and a lot fewer turns, especially hard 180 or more turns. So we're at about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The battery warning is getting pretty heavy, but as you see, when we come in for this landing, the battery does recover to over 3.5 volts, so that is fine. And we land there with 2 minutes and almost 40 seconds. Here's a live look at my test rig again, if you were wondering, instead of just looking at pictures. I like these props a lot. I would encourage you to try them out. They're oddly lighter than the other gem fans, the 2.5-inch gem fans, the 2540s, and that surprised me a little bit. I showed you those pictures of the weight just to show you that it was, you know, 1.5 grams lighter with these props. So you have more prop, you have a little less pitch on the prop, but the prop's lighter. And I thought these props were pretty durable as well. I had a few crashes and I've used the same set. I bent them back and they work just fine. Long term, I think these are probably going to be the motors, or this size of motor, that we go to for 3-inch props like this, at least for performance and gaining some efficiency. That weight at 8.42 grams, that comes in somewhere between the 1108s that we had from iFlight and the Rotor X 1107 7600s, but of course that's a 3S motor. I actually found when flying those motors on 3-inch props that I ended up burning one out, so they're actually recommending that motor for a 2.5-inch prop. Also some additional weights. Maybe I should get together a fancy little spreadsheet or something, but for right now I'm just reading from my notes. This motor is slightly lighter than the RCX 1304 5000 kV. Those came in at 8.85 stock. Also, LDARC 1304 6200 kV, which that's also a 3S motor. This is slightly heavier, so that gives you an idea as far as scale, where they come in weight. And you can also look at performance. I really didn't review the LDRC 1304 6200s. I just showed a real short flight, I believe was the video I did. I just didn't think the performance was there. And also the odd motor holes kind of made the motor wires come off the arm rather than directly lining up with the arm. They had lined those up for 2 different sizes of motor holes, so that was a little bit odd. Right now these motors are only available from Banggood and directly from GEPRC themselves. Banggood has them listed for $14.90, so not necessarily a cheap motor by any stretch, but it is a pretty solid performing motor, I think, especially for 3-inch props like these. This would be my go-to motor. What I'll probably do after this review is take these motors off of here and put them on that XF3 frame that I flew earlier, because I just think the performance is about the same as those 1108 5000 kVs, and the efficiency is better, and it also decreases my weight a little bit too, so I'll probably gain just a touch more efficiency on that particular machine using these 1206 4500 kV motors. I don't think any of our shops, US stateside, have them on stock yet, but you may find more and more of these motors coming out. I suspect this is what we're going to see more of in our micro arena, especially in the case of running 3-inch props. I think it's a better idea to stay away from 1107 and 1108 and move towards 1205, 1206. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching. God, I stumbled all over myself this time. Jeez Louise. Hey, everybody.